Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. Here's your host, Morgan Colby and Rick Lemon.
Welcome to the Fantasy Champions Fantasy Football Podcast. The way you just pushed your hair back went to the beat of the song, and I wasn't sure I was okay with it. I kind of felt mentally violated for a second.
You got jealous.
I got
It's like watching Tom Brady play football. That's how other fans feel when they watch Tom Brady play football.
It is Tuesday, June 18th. My name is Morgan Colby, if you never listened before, and I got Rick Lemon right across from me. And we bring you everything that there is to do with fantasy football. And on today's episode, we are going to talk about sleepers for 2019, more specifically at the wide receiver position. But first, make sure you do the following. Head over to twitter.com. Make sure you put the .com. No one uses apps, do they?
Oh.
Yeah. more
Yeah,
like
what are
all
we
of
living
society.
in 2005?
Go to Twitter at the FF Champs. Go to Instagram at the Fantasy Champions. Like us on both those platforms, and then go to facebook.com/the Fantasy Champions. You can find us there. Subscribe wherever you listen to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, YouTube. Click the bell on YouTube for notifications. Make sure you subscribe there. Leave a review, because the more reviews you leave, the larger our community gets. And the larger our community gets, the more information we can provide you with for fantasy football. So share this podcast with your friends. Before we get into the sleeper segment, I want to go into the news first. There's actually quite a bit of information.
Is there? In the middle of June?
It's like little notes that'll probably change as the offseason goes along. Training camp starts in like 2 weeks, I think. So these are just some of the notes that we have. Todd Gurley is not concerned about his knee, and he doesn't expect it to affect his workload, which is what you can expect from him. There was also news about Todd Gurley from his personal trainer that he does have an arthritic knee condition, is what he called it.
Oh, boy.
So they said it's not going to be a big concern for him. We've talked about Todd Gurley many times, so we don't need to continue, but it's just a question of how much they dial him back at this point. So I don't know how much that actually is going to be.
You're going to have to see it now.
The Darrell Henderson truthers are
be so
alive
much
and
hype
well
for the next few
Oh, it's
months.
true. You know where he's going now? He's going like third, fourth pick in the second round.
Yeah. I'm surprised it's not lower.
That's crazy. Todd Gurley
I think it's going to keep dropping.
The number, it is going to keep dropping. The second he doesn't play a preseason game, people are going to be like, what happened to Todd? Where did he go? You losers. Let me draft him. Let me do it.
Okay.
49ers tight end Garrett Selleck is recovering from back surgery. That's meaningless. LaShawn McCoy is expected to be in the same role as last year.
So, zero fantasy output?
Probably. He had like 200 carries last year and he didn't do anything.
Did he
with
really?
Them. Yeah, something ridiculous.
Oh, man.
I believe that could be wrong. So I don't want
I just
stat
look at the
checkers.
fantasy numbers and I go, man, he blows.
Those losers who listen to podcasts or go on Twitter just to troll people. The stat checkers, he had 196 carries and you have 200.
He actually had 198 carries per possession.
Get it right. I really like Devin Singletary, the guy they have behind him, the rookie running back.
Who?
Devin Singletary.
What?
I think he was a third-round pick.
Who?
Devin Singletary.
Devin who?
Oh, boy. Frank Reich said Paris Campbell. There's a couple Frank Reich notes. He's putting everyone on notice saying, hey, you should probably listen to me. Frank Reich said Paris Campbell will probably affect Nyheim Hines' role. That makes me feel a lot better about Marlon Mack. He also followed that up by saying, according to, he said that he wants Marlon Mack to carry the workload at the running back position. Nyheim Hines is one of the most overhyped running backs right now in fantasy
there's
football.
Hype around him?
There is hype around him. A lot
Why?
of people, because he's a pass-catching back. They think he can be like the next Tariq Cohen. Do you know how many targets he had last year? He had 82 targets.
How many games did... how many targets did he have in the games that Marlon Mack missed, though? That would be an interesting stat.
That's a deep dive stat there,
It is.
boss.
I'm not taking that dive.
He's like, I'm not. Is that worth it? Yeah, no, I think that people need to chillax on Marlon Mack. I mean, not on Marlon Mack. My God, that's my guy. On Nyheim Hines, I don't think that he can produce at the level that people want to believe he can. He might catch a few balls, but I think Marlon Mack is a good pass-catching running back. He's a good running back in general. Marlon Mack has one dimension to his game, and I think Andrew Luck likes to throw it too. Like, for lack of a better option, Andrew Luck threw it to Nyheim Hines.
Yeah.
I think that was kind of the place. So there's going to be some haters on that because we do have some Nyheim Hines truthers. Matt Nagy said he was impressed with David Montgomery's route running. Surprise, surprise. Love you, David Montgomery. That's all I got to say.
You know, these quotes...
Stop it. Don't ruin it.
I'm not just saying for this, but just in general...
Isn't it ridiculous?
95% of these quotes in the offseason are just like total BS.
So the one thing that I like to do when you see all this information is you have to, because coaches, everyone gets overhyped about anyone. I saw when you go on rotoworld.com, you look at player news, there's news about like fourth-string wide receivers, and coaches are getting hyped up about him. Like, oh my God, this guy's amazing. Like, this is one guy on the 49ers, or I can't remember what team it was, but they've been working with Wes Welker, and they're getting better at route running, and they're like getting all excited about him. Yeah, I was like, dude, what the crap? So, yeah, fourth-string guys get overhyped. So when you get this hype, you have to back it up with like reality. And when you look at some of this stuff, like Matt Nagy saying he likes David Montgomery's route running, you have to look at it and say, okay, what are the actions that they're doing to back up what he's saying? Because if he's just saying it to say it,
yeah,
then it means absolutely nothing. For me, I've said this for a while. They traded up to get David Montgomery. They want David Montgomery to be that number one workhorse back. And I think this just lends to Matt Nagy and what he wants to do. And I think this doesn't mean that he's going to take work away from Tariq Cohen in the passing game, but I think they're going to utilize him a little bit in the passing game as a lot more than they did, what's his name, Jordan Howard. So
that's fair.
Anyway,
that's a fair argument.
James Conner, this is where things get a little wonky.
Okay.
This has never been a thing ever, and this is why you should temper this excitement, this comment. James Conner expects to split snaps or for the snaps to be more evenly distributed between the running backs in Pittsburgh. There's also reports saying that this is supposedly a smoke screen for the Pittsburgh Steelers, just trying to get people to think they're going to split.
Who reported this? Was it where did it come from?
Somebody from NFL Network, I believe.
Okay.
So, it was James Conner saying it. So he said it to some media outsource. I don't know. Some media source, I should say.
That's interesting. James Conner said it?
James Conner said that. So people think that is a smokescreen and that it's not actual reality. Never in Mike Tomlin's life has he had a split back system. And the guy sitting behind James Conner, his name is Jalen Samuels and Benny Snell. So
Benny Snell sounds like some like 8.
He's a rookie running back.
He sounds round. Like the number 8 hitter on someone from the Sandlot.
Benny Snell Jr. Yeah. So James Conner, I don't expect it to be a problem, but if this is something that turns into a problem, I actually did a couple of months ago. I was starting to like Jalen Samuels a little bit, but I don't know if I should be doing that or not.
Did it? I mean, after this, when James Conner says it, that could be a little interesting.
Marquez Valdes-Scantling is expected to win the number 2 depth chart position behind Davante Adams. There's a lot of people. This is actually, if you go to fantasypros.com and you look up the ECR of the wide receivers, Geronimo Allison is ranked higher than Marquez Valdes-Scantling. So somebody either knows something more than me, or I'm sitting here watching the depth chart start to develop. I think Scantling is going to be over Geronimo Allison next year. Not that it matters; it's the second wide receiver in Green Bay, but
it's probably gonna be like
I think
guys will be late or undrafted.
I will say Valdes-Scantling may be on our list today. He was on our Instagram post. So we may talk about him a little bit later. But Chris Herndon, he probably will face a 2-game suspension. He got pleaded guilty for DWI, driving with, I don't even know what that stands for. But he pleaded guilty to it, and he probably will face a 2-game suspension. A lot of people thought Chris Herndon was a sleeper at tight end. This might hurt a little bit at the beginning of the season, at least. Chad B is expected to be the Vikings' third wide receiver. 90% of the targets for the wide receiver position are going to go to Adam Thielen.
That's a good opportunity for him, to be a number 3 target on the team. And
to get like 25 targets, maybe?
For the season, maybe. That's potentially.
That's a high expectation.
Yeah, you got to temper those expectations down a little bit.
Yeah, it's true. Dante Pettis is expected, or not expected. Dante Pettis is turning heads at minicamp, which is not unexpected. Marquise Goodwin is kind of losing his job in San Francisco.
Yeah.
He was like, over the course of the games that he started last year. Never mind. We talk about him later, too. I'm not going to bring him up.
Oh, there you go.
Mike Evans restructured his contract. I don't want to give you the details. It was some minute amount and nonsensical thing that doesn't matter. So that does it for the news. Off-season news is so boring.
That's what I'm telling you, dude.
This was me taking so much information. Like, I wrote down at least 40 news points that we could have talked about, and I took out at least 90% of them.
Yeah.
And this is what we came away with, and it's still boring as crap.
Because
I needed was Matt Nagy said he's impressed with David Montgomery's route running. All I needed was that.
After the NFL draft and free agency, it's just like a wasteland for 2 months.
You just need to get me training camp, and that's it. Just get me there. It's a slow drudge, and I'm getting there closer and closer. But these are going to be the longest 2 weeks of my life. I'll tell you that much. Let's move into wide receiver sleepers. Sleepers are so important to constructing a successful fantasy team, and I do want to note, because so many people get sleepers and breakouts confused. And then people get frustrated and they're like, why did you not put DJ Moore on this list? Why? Sleepers and breakouts are very different things.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and I don't want to spoil a show that we will do a show on breakouts, and that may change over the next couple months, but I think like guys like Tyler Boyd, DJ Moore, those guys can be breakouts this year, right? Calvin Ridley, those guys can break out. They're not necessarily sleepers because they're going in the middle rounds. And there are guys that people are buying right now. They want those players. Sleepers are players that could probably, there's a minute chance, probably like 2%, that a sleeper is going to finish as a wide receiver 1 or a running back 1 or at the top 10 of their position. But these are guys that are going to be wide receiver 2s, guys that you pick up off the waiver wire, guys like Phillip Lindsay from last year. You know what I mean? If you had Phillip Lindsay as a sleeper, you absolutely nailed it. But he was like a high-end running back too. And those are the guys that you're looking at when you're trying to figure out your sleepers. You're getting these guys in late rounds. They're people that can come in and maybe not help your team on a week-to-week basis, maybe help your team on a week-to-week basis if you have a weak position. But they're also tradable assets. And there's also the off chance that you get that 2% guy that hits. You know what I mean? Yep. Like a James Conner late in drafts last year. So those are what sleepers are. Yes, if you're complaining about us not talking about DJ Moore for the 14th time,
I know you want to.
I know you want to. So let's get into the sleepers at the wide receiver position for 2019. I'll start.
Okay.
Now I got to choose one. I'm going to take Dante Pettis.
Okay.
I'll take Dante Pettis. Dante Pettis is actually going, I believe, in the 8th or 9th round right now, which is a little bit.
Jumping up. Right?
He's a middle round guy. He's moving up the board a little bit, but I've noticed that people are sleeping on him right now because there are guys like Tyler Boyd, Christian Kirk, DJ Moore. Some of those guys are ahead of him, and people want to draft them a little bit more. I like Dante Pettis because last year you came into the season. I think we both had the same sentiment about Marquise Goodwin being the guy. At the number one wide receiver in the 49ers, Jimmy Garoppolo for a full season. And so I really felt that there was going to be some kind of breakout for Marquise Goodwin. Obviously, Jimmy G tore his ACL.
Some things changed, correct.
Marquise Goodwin got hurt. So Dante Pettis arose in the what is it called? The rankings as the season went along. He started I think 7 or 8 games, and over those games he looked really good. When he starting, I think it was week 8 or 9. From that point to the end of the season, he was a wide receiver 20. So he finished just in the wide receiver 2 conversation. I don't remember. I think it was in the 2018 draft. He was picked with the 12th pick in the second round. And he's a very talented guy. His measurables aren't amazing. I'm looking at them right now. It's not. He
was a second round pick, though?
Second round pick, yeah.
So that's not bad.
So he was a guy that was expected to come in and be a good player. He showed signs of being really good. And I think if he ends up, which it looks like right now, mini camps, OTAs, all of that stuff coming together, I think that he's starting to look like the number 1 wide receiver for the 49ers. If he lands the number 1 wide receiver and Jimmy Garoppolo stays on the field the whole season, which sounds like a lot, but it really isn't. I think Dante Pettis could finish as a mid-range wide receiver 2.
Yeah.
And I think that people are sleeping on this guy. Like, you might even be able to, in some drafts, get him in the 10th round. That's kind of pushing it a little bit, but I really do like Dante Pettis.
Yeah, I think he will go actually in the 10th round in a lot of drafts because people will see his name, especially if you're just in like a common redraft league and be like, who's that? Isn't he like the Ravens tight end?
They're going to be like, who's that? Unless you followed the waiver wire closely last year.
Yeah, that's true.
Joe and your family league is going to be like, who the crap is Dante Pettis?
Yeah, Uncle Jim. I like him, and I like pretty much anyone on the 49ers this year. So I'm not hating on your take at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm with you. You want to hear my guy?
Yeah, sure.
Number 1 off my list is somebody that you hate. But I love. I've always had a soft spot for him. You want to know what his name is?
What's his name?
Corey Davis. Love me some Corey Davis.
I know you do.
Now his number is probably, I don't know if you just looked that up while you were typing him.
5th overall pick.
He was, what was it again? You want
5th
to tell me?
Overall.
Oh, okay. All right. What was it? One more time.
5th overall.
Okay.
What was that? The 2017 draft?
Yes.
2016, 2017.
I want to say it was 2017. So receivers, it usually does take a few years for them.
Yeah.
To kind of take that next step. I mean, if you watched when the Titans played New England in the playoffs, I think it was last year, or 2 years ago, sorry. He actually had a fantastic game, and there was one play where he went up in double coverage in the back of the end zone and ripped it away from 2 Patriots corners, and everyone was like, "Oh, who is this guy?" I mean, he's extremely talented. Hasn't done anything yet in the NFL, though.
Yeah.
And I will say that. However, you might ask, what might change this year? For one, it's the prime year, right?
You lead in with a question.
This is a sleeper, okay?
He's like, I gotta justify.
I'm justifying this. This is the jump year for receivers, right? Typically, yep, it is. Yep, exactly.
No, that's very true.
It's his third year. This is kind of the year where it's like, okay, he shows his potential. And number 2, which I think could also be a key factor, is if Ryan Tannehill takes that job. We haven't seen Ryan Tannehill yet in that offense. He is probably a better quarterback than Marcus Mariota. I think it's debatable, but when it comes to just naturally throwing the ball, he probably is better. So I would love to see what Ryan Tannehill can do with Corey Davis.
Yep.
And I think they could be really good together. And even I think last year, Corey Davis had a few games where he got like 9 or 10 catches and had like a really good game, but fantasy-wise just didn't do anything because it was Marcus Mariota. And he had like 80 yards receiving pretty much. Yeah. So in standard leagues, it was just 8 fantasy points, and everybody was like, oh. But in the game, he was actually very good. So if Ryan Tannehill takes over, or even if Marcus Mariota can stay healthy and Corey Davis takes that next step, you could be getting a steal at the 10th round.
So my thing is not necessarily, it doesn't have anything to do with Corey Davis's ability or talent. Mm-hmm. It's the fact that they don't have a quarterback that can throw the football. In the last few years, you not only have seen a decrease statistically for Marcus Mariota, but you've also seen a decrease in the amount they pass the football over the last 3 seasons. Or the last 4 seasons, I believe. So for me, when I look at a guy like Marcus Mariota throwing it to Corey Davis, like he's had all of the opportunity in the world as the number 1 wide receiver to be that guy. If Marcus Mariota loses the job to Ryan Tannehill, which to be honest with you, I don't expect to happen, but if that happens, you might see more of. I see these two guys so close together, Ryan Tannehill and Marcus Mariota, that it's just like. Is there really going to be that leap?
Maybe not, but
like if Corey Davis went to a team with a quarterback, he would be way up on my draft board. Like he would be in my top 25.
Yeah.
But it's just because he doesn't have any quarterback throwing him the football.
Here's what I'll say with
they're going to be running it a lot with Derrick Henry. Those are my concerns about Corey Davis.
No, they're fair. They're fair. I'm not dissing you. But
being a 9th round pick right now is kind of sketch for me.
So you said there's like no difference to you between Tannehill and Mariota, right?
Yeah, I think Tannehill can throw the ball a little bit better, but
who is better, Tannehill or Blaine Gabbert?
Tannehill.
Okay.
Oh,
come on, don't.
I'll say Tannehill for it.
Okay. Because that is something that you need to keep in mind too, because I'm going to look up the exact numbers here in a second, but I think Blaine Gabbert... You said
Blaine Gabbert? I thought you said Blake Bortles.
No, Blaine Gabbert.
I was convinced that you said Blake Bortles.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah, he's better than Blaine Gabbert.
Okay, thank you. That's why I was like, dude. So last year, Blaine Gabbert played in 8 games. Now imagine Ryan Tannehill is playing those 8 games instead of Blaine Gabbert.
Right.
Doesn't that change things a little bit for you? A little bit.
So go ahead.
I just think it's inevitable that Mariota's going to get hurt like he does every year. And when he does, instead of Blaine Gabbert coming in, it's Ryan Tannehill. So Corey Davis won't just disappear off the face of the earth.
The thing that concerns me, and I let me just look this up for a second. So last year he had a 58% catch rate, which is obviously not the best in the world. One of the things that I wanted to look at, and I just pulled it up. This is an interesting situation. So his catch rate was 58%. The true catch rate is a combination of his catchable target rate and his catch rate. So his catchable target rate, which basically means balls thrown in his direction that were catchable, not sucky friggin' targets, was 76%. Which means his true catch rate is 75.6. So what this tells me is that his catch rate drops a full 15 points just because his quarterback blows. That's terrible. It's terrible.
But again, remember, Gabbert was playing in half of those games.
The other thing is the efficiency. In the 2 years he's played, his yards per target is 8, and his yards per reception is around 13. And so for a wide receiver 1, what you're looking for at those 2 spots is that you want yards per target to be like 12 and yards per reception to be like 15. So that's kind of the range that you would expect Corey Davis to be. For me, my concern is only this, is the pure fact that he doesn't have a quarterback to throw him the football.
Yeah.
And for wide receivers, that really does affect your potential. Like you're going to see Marquise Brown. No, not Mark. Is it Marquise Brown? Hollywood Brown on the Baltimore Ravens, drafted high in the draft. He was one of the first wide receivers off the board. I think in the pick 20. He's not going to be good for a couple of years, if that, until they figure out if Lamar Jackson can throw the football. So I think Corey Davis and that guy's in the same conversation. But if Corey Davis had a quarterback, the conversation would be entirely different. I just think I can't put him on my sleeper list because I've been following him for 3 years as well. The first year he came into the league and you told me he was a first-round pick, I got sweaty. Yeah. I was like 5th overall. I was like, let's go. He's a good, very talented wide receiver. And if you look at some of his numbers, not to ramble on, but some of his numbers, for the first half of the season, he averaged 8.5 targets a game. Because of his terrible catch rate and his terrible quarterback, he only pulled down about 4.5 targets per game. So if you prorate that out to a full season, he would have been targeted 135 times, got 1,024 yards and 4 touchdowns. He finished the season with 6, so I think you could give him 7 or 8 instead. But at that point, you launch yourself into that wide receiver 2 conversation.
Yeah.
The problem is towards the back half of the season. So the front half of the season, he had one game with 13 receptions. He had one game with 13 targets. He had another game with 15 targets. He had 2 games with 10 targets. Over the last half of the year, he had 2 games with 7 targets, and then after that, the next best one was like 4 or 5. So it's like, I don't know what that was probably the Blaine Gabbert effect.
I was just gonna look that up.
That's probably the Blaine Gabbert effect. So it's a concerning trend for me. If Marcus Mariota is not going to be efficient as a passer in that offense this year, then Corey Davis is not going to be a guy that you can rely on in this season. And I think as a sleeper, I don't know if people are really sleeping on him, because I think he's getting picked at the spot he should be picked at, maybe a little bit further back. I think he's actually getting overhyped a little bit, if you're asking me. But
don't diss on my man Corey Davis.
I'm not dissing. I'm sorry, boss. Let's move to the next one. I'm going to take Marquez Valdes-Scantling. Now, that's a difficult name. Well,
Wow.
I'll abbreviate MVS. That's what we'll call him.
MVS.
So, for me, Marquez Valdes-Scantling is one of those he really didn't break out at all last year. He came in and had a couple of decent games, and it was like 2 or 3 weeks. I think it was the course of 4 weeks that people were like, well, I'm going to go out and get this guy. And it was because Geronimo Allison got hurt, and so he started to see more targets. What I've seen in the last couple weeks is that the Packers are really falling in love with Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and if he does win that wide receiver 2 job, then he can take a leap over Geronimo Allison for that number 2 spot on the roster. If that happens, last year Aaron Rodgers threw it. I think the Packers had the number 2 amount, like they ranked number 2 in the league in the amount of passes that they threw. So for me, there's going to be a crap ton of targets for the Green Bay Packers. They're going to throw it a lot. It's just that's the Packers. What else do you expect? They're going to throw it to Devontae Adams a lot. But I think there are other receivers on the team. And I think Marquez Valdes-Scantling being the number 2 receiver, them throwing it as much, he's going to have, I'm not going to put a number on it, but he's going to have the opportunity. I believe Valdes-Scantling was a 4th-round pick. So he wasn't.
Yeah, I think.
He wasn't. He's not like this amazing, talented wide receiver that got drafted extremely high. But I think that he has the potential to be really good. Now, he's a guy that you can get in like the 13th, 14th round, like late in the draft.
He's going 13th.
Like if you're not drafting quarterbacks and tight ends at that point, you're looking for like really sleeper guys.
You already have your team set.
Yeah,
and just
like this is a guy that you can take, and I think that there's an opportunity for him to rise up into that wide receiver 2 conversation. He could be that next Randall Cobb type of player.
Yeah.
So
especially if Rodgers has a bounce back year,
especially if Rodgers has a bounce back year,
he's expected to do.
Yeah. And the other thing is that he was a rookie in 2019. So the expectations never meet the reality when it comes to these wide receivers, especially in their rookie years. So for me, going into his second year, a lot of the guys on my list for sleepers are second-year players that have an opportunity to break out. And so for me, I don't know if Valdes-Scantling has any opportunity of being a wide receiver 1. That's basically impossible when you already have a really good wide receiver on your team. But I think he has the possibility of being a mid-range wide receiver 2, which is extremely valuable on your fantasy team, especially at the wide receiver position where, it's hard to get top-level wide receivers. And there's so many, like, the guys between 8 and like 20 are all generally, not the same guys, but they're generally like the same type of player, producing around the same numbers. So for me, Valdes-Scantling is that guy. I think he could have a really, really nice season, especially if he lands as the wide receiver 2. If he's the wide receiver 3, I think it's going to take probably a few weeks into the season for something to happen, but he's one of my sleepers, and I will definitely be taking him most likely in the 13th, 14th round.
Yeah, I'm liking your picks. I don't really disagree here. Especially if he was going higher, I would disagree. But the fact that he's going in rounds 13, 14 right now.
Yep.
He is getting slept on. I mean, I think he probably will be the number 2 receiver in Green Bay this year.
Yep.
And again, if that happens, where Aaron Rodgers is healthy, Aaron Rodgers is back to being Aaron Rodgers, he's going to put up similar numbers to, as you said,
He was a
Randall
5th round
Cobb.
draft pick.
5th round, yeah.
Yep.
So he was somewhere in that range. But you want to give me, or do you want me to give you my next guy?
Yes, sir.
I was tempted to steal your guy, but I'm not going to. I'll go with someone who I just threw on the board. Who I was thinking, should I put him here? And then I decided yes. That man.
He's like, I decided, yeah, sure.
Bill Belichick in any trades.
He's like, should I trade for Michael Roberts? Yes.
Yeah, I guess I'll.
Hey, you could take a 7th round pick. Oh, he failed the physical?
Who cares?
Who cares?
Just won a championship. All right, my guy, D.D. Westbrook.
D.D. Westbrook.
So here's a guy who he's going late in drafts. I'm not sure what round. I think it's like the 11th. So when you're, to me, with a lot of these guys that we're bringing up with the receivers, you're kind of looking at people who are getting slept on and have the potential to be maybe not a WR1 because that's a little bit much this late in the draft.
Right.
But at least a WR2, and I think D.D. Westbrook can definitely be a WR2. He has a very good chance to be the guy in Jacksonville. I think he probably is the guy. He's their number 1 option. And they no longer have Blake Bortles. They now have a guy named Nick Foles. Now, say what you want about Nick Foles, but I think most people would agree that he's probably a better quarterback than Blake Bortles.
Yeah.
Especially just throwing the ball. And I think Jacksonville isn't going to throw the ball a lot this year. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
But they are going to throw the ball more than they did last year. They have to.
Right.
And if they do that, which I think they will do that, D.D. Westbrook will succeed. He's going to get targets. We'll see more in training camp of who Nick Foles kind of like develops a friendship with and is kind of like his go-to guy.
Right.
But if that ends up being somebody in Jacksonville is going to emerge, I think it's, as of right now, D.D. Westbrook. And if that's the case, and you're getting him in the 11th, 12th round, wherever he's going right now, that's pretty good.
I think the interesting thing with a guy because I actually like D.D. Westbrook too. The interesting thing with a guy like D.D. Westbrook is that last year he had 4 games, 3 games where he was over 10 targets, and then a bunch of games where he had 6, 7, or 8. So he didn't have a terrible, terrible season last year. If you want to put it in perspective to, like, fantasy-wise, he blew. But in this reality, he had 700 receiving yards and 5 touchdowns. So he wasn't absolutely awful when it came to being a wide receiver in the NFL.
No, he was
general.
good. Especially in the situation that he was
right.
in.
He is a talented guy. He was a 4th round draft pick. His measurables aren't terrible, but I think the interesting thing about D.D. Westbrook is the fact that he did have Blake Bortles as his quarterback last year. Now, my question is Nick Foles really any different? Now, I say that in the context of they're going to throw it less. Not the fact that Nick Foles blows, because I do think he blows. But I don't know if Nick Foles is going to throw it a lot. He's a game manager.
He is.
And so my concern is that any Jacksonville wide receiver is going to be a little bit risky. Obviously, if you're drafting late and you have D.D. Westbrook and you're going after him, I think you can consider him a sleeper. But for me, I just don't think he's going to have that wide receiver 2 season. I think he'll fall more in the wide receiver 3 conversation and maybe low end wide receiver 3. And I think that he's not really going to help the team. Like he'll sit on your waiver wire, hovering right around that. Should I pick him up? Should I not pick him up? And everyone, should I not pick him up? You know what I mean?
Right.
So I think that D.D. Westbrook, is he a draftable asset? That's the question that I want to ask myself. And when I look at the situation in Jacksonville, I just don't think so.
So you think Jacksonville's going to run the ball more this year than they did last year?
I think there's going to be more touches going in the direction of Leonard Fournette.
Okay.
So passing, like Nick Foles loves to throw it to the dump offs, not just necessarily running.
He does,
backs,
but you know what? He also likes taking the risk. He likes throwing a deep ball. He is a game manager, yes, But I don't think that necessarily means they're going to throw the ball less.
I mean, could I see an improvement?
Especially when you're going from Blake Bortles to anybody.
Here's the thing: he was targeted 101 times last year. Do you see that increasing at all?
Yes.
How much?
101. I could see him getting like 140.
140.
Yep.
I was gonna say 120 maybe.
130.
I mean, his catch rate doesn't blow. It's 65%. So to me, I mean, if he gets into that 140 range, he could actually be really good. But
I'll say 140 is a little much, but
yeah, we have to see.
I think he is going to get more targets.
The unfortunate thing for me is that we have to look at, like, when Nick Foles. The one thing I'd like to look at is when obviously different offense, but when Nick Foles was on the field the same time as Alshon Jeffrey in Philly, how good did Alshon Jeffrey perform over the course of those weeks? I don't have those numbers, so I'm teasing.
Trying to just go off memory that he was kind of inconsistent, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, you want to hope that a guy like D.D. Westbrook breaks out, but I think out of all the guys that we talk about on the show, I'm not sure D.D. Westbrook is going to be the most likely to do that.
Okay, D.D. Westbrook or Corey Davis?
Corey Davis.
Oh, wow. Look at you.
Probably. For me, both the guys is for the quarterbacks. It really is. I think when you look at Westbrook, it is his third year, thoh. So, third-year breakout.
I'm telling you,
you're going with the third-year breakout, so I'm going with the second-year guys.
Dude, learn from me last year. Second-year breakout ain't where it's at. It's the third year. Ask Corey Davis.
Yeah. Let's move on to the last guy we're going to talk about. This is an interesting guy. There were some other guys on our list. I had Deshaun Jackson just as a reference.
Cortland Sutton for me.
You had Cortland Sutton. So the last guy I'm going to say is Curtis Samuel.
You mean... Oh, okay. All right.
The Curtis Samuel.
Okay. All right.
From Carolina.
Okay.
The reason why I like Curtis Samuel is that last year he was, what is it, the number 3 wide receiver on the team or something like that?
Yeah, he was. Yep.
He had a bunch of really decent weeks, and he ended up having a relatively, decent season relatively decent season when it came to how he performed. But there were just never like any games that you were going to start Curtis Samuel at all. He was the 8th overall pick in the second round, and his measurables are really good.
Yes.
So for him, he's sitting behind DJ Moore. And this is the way I'm looking at it. If I'm drafting DJ Moore, and Curtis Samuel's going in like the 15th round right now, by the way. If I'm drafting DJ Moore, then I'm probably going to go draft Curtis Samuel to throw him in the conversation.
Right.
Because I think one of these Panthers wide receivers is going to break out this year. At least one of them. And I think for Curtis Samuel, I think a lot of people are sleeping on him, but he was actually, to me, when I looked at him, I think he was the better pass catcher than DJ Moore. DJ Moore is like a playmaker. Curtis Samuel's the better pass catcher, and he's a better route runner. So I think for me, if you were going to choose a guy that was going to have a better season because Carolina Panthers wide receivers don't usually generally have like huge wide receiver one seasons, but you have two talented guys, and you could arguably see like when you look at Adam Thielen, it's a completely different situation, but Adam Thielen and Stefon Diggs, they're so close to each other in the rankings, for fantasy football. I don't understand why Curtis Samuel is not closer ranked or closer drafted to DJ Moore. Everyone's just assuming DJ Moore is going to be that guy. Well, what happens if it ends up being Curtis Samuel? Then you're sitting there as a fantasy owner going, what the crap did I do? I should have taken Curtis Samuel. Like, for me, I'm going to avoid that situation in leagues that I draft DJ Moore. I'll draft Curtis Samuel.
So you know how I'm going to avoid the situation is just to stay away from Carolina Panthers wide receivers.
What difference does it make? It's a 15th round pick.
No, I know. If he's going in the 15th round.
He's probably, most leagues, he's going undrafted.
Yes, I think he's getting slept on then because there's a very good chance, as you said, that he could actually be the number 1 guy in Carolina. Or if not, he's definitely going to be the number 2 guy. Right. Just personally, for me, it's just like Cam Newton's shoulder is like very scary to me.
Yeah. He's like, I had nightmares about Cam Newton's shoulder.
I woke up in a sweat after Todd Gurley's arthritis knee and Cam Newton's shoulder were attacking me.
Flip.
So yeah, but I mean, overall though, I do like the idea
Right.
of Curtis Samuel.
I think the other thing is too is, so not to take anything away from our boy Christian McCaffrey, but I think they
Hey, watch yourself.
they
here.
can't justifiably throw it to the running back position as much as they did last year.
What was it like?
Yeah, he had like
110,
100 something receptions. Yeah. So I think for me, they're going to start throwing it to these guys. And the question is which one. They're both going to get their opportunities. I think they're both going to have their, top 10 weeks in fantasy football. But it's a matter of which one's going to be the guy. Like, I'm hoping that somebody in this wide receiver core, breaks out. And so over the course of the last, I think it was 6-7 weeks of the year, from week 11 to 17, I believe, he had 22 receptions, 315 yards, and 2 touchdowns. His catch rate was around 60%. If you prorate that out, it would have been like 60 catches for 840 yards and 5 touchdowns for the season. That is a good second year for a wide receiver. He was not a rookie, by the way. I flailed on that.
He was?
No.
He was second year. So
second year guy.
Hey,
so
you're joining the club.
A third year breakout. So for Curtis Samuel, I think that is a good second year, and I think he can build upon that. Like, if you came back to me, at the end of the year and you said, oh, you got that right, I would think that Curtis Samuel is probably, if he ups what he does from this year, I think he could reach 7 or 8 touchdowns and 1,200 yards. That's a lot of output. So it really depends on if he gets that wide receiver 1 spot, because Cam Newton doesn't throw it a lot. You know how many years has Cam Newton been in the league?
6.
All right, I'm going to give you an over-under.
Okay.
Over-under 2 on the amount of times Cam Newton has thrown for 4,000 yards.
That's actually, it might be under just because of injuries.
It is under, and he's only done it once.
Wow.
His rookie year.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
So, and that's not even excluding, that's for injuries, that injuries didn't affect it. There were seasons where he played 15, 16 games and didn't get 4,000 yards. He's not a prolific passing quarterback.
Well, it doesn't help that they do run it a lot, and he runs it a lot, too.
Yes,
so
right. So I think only one of these guys can do it. I think DJ Moore, just as a first-round pick and with all the talent, can. But a lot of people are sleeping on Curtis Samuel, and I think Curtis Samuel could finish, even if, I don't think both guys are going to be successful, but I think the ceiling for Curtis Samuel this year is a wide receiver too, and if you're getting that in the 15th round, you can justify it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That'll do it for our sleepers.
Oh, there you go.
At the wide receiver position, not for all of them.
Just one quick name. I won't have to argue why, but James Washington. We both had him on the list.
Yeah, both of us had him on the list.
Steelers number 2 receiver. Watch out for him.
There is a report floating around that Dante Moncrief may be the wide receiver 2, which is a little bit concerning about that. But I don't know. I really do like James. James Washington was supposed to be Juju. I'll say that. He was a first-round pick. His first, second-round pick. His player comp is Antonio Brown, according to the playerprofiler.com. And so James Washington, really good player, but I'm not sure if they're even going to... I mean, I hope they utilize him, but if they start throwing it to Dante Moncrief a bunch, frick me.
Right.
So that'll do it for our wide receivers, sleepers. Be sure to listen on Thursday as we talk about our last edition of Sleepers for this year. Who knows? Maybe we'll throw another show in, give you an overall sleeper crowd after the preseason starts. But this is our last pre-training camp Sleepers show. And on Thursday we talk about running backs, and we'll go over a quick question, an interesting question that we discussed before this program.
Ooh.
So you got any closing ideas for us, boss?
Bro, don't you dare diss on my man Corey Davis ever again.
I will diss on him every day.
Or I will
life.
just throw Christian McCaffrey and give him his big bicep right arm punch to your cheek, right in your left cheek.
Talk to you Thursday, Fantasy Champs.
Peace out.
Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Champions Podcast. Make sure you subscribe on iTunes and YouTube, and follow us on Twitter @TheFFChamps.